na ang final copy ng Maharlika Investment Fund Bill at inaayos ang ilang pagkakamali. Yan ang paliwanag ni Senator Mark Villar, ang sponsor ng panukalang batas, kay Senate Majority Leader Joel Villanueva.
I don't want to glorify yung mga sinasabing minadali or nagkamali. You know, we're all human beings, and you know, during the time it's already 3 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning, and nangyayari yung mga typo errors, nangyayari yung minsan mali yung numero, and that's the main reason why the bills would have to go through the Senate Secretariat and the House of Representatives Secretary General to look into it, no, bago dalhin sa palasyo at maging enrolled bill.
One expert is noting the unclear guidelines on how the Maharlika Investment Fund will be used.
The whole problem is we have a big policy, which is this. We don't have clear guidelines. And in fairness, the guidelines will not come from the law.
Yes.
The guidelines will come from the management and the board. The board can just say, we're just going to put it in short-term money market instruments until we find the investments. Well, what if they start buying stocks anywhere? Basically, they're saying, with the 75 billion we're giving you, bahala ka.
Lawmakers and economic managers say that the Maharlika Investment Fund is done and that whatever needed fixing is already finished. But in a recent discussion paper, a group of economists and academics say the MIF is beyond repair. For their part, two former Senate presidents flagged the way corrections were being made to the bill before it is transmitted to the Office of the President. We tackle all these concerns on the Maharlika Investment Fund bill tonight on the Chiefs. Welcome to the Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao. With me tonight in the studio, Robbie Alampay of One News and Ana Marie Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star. Chiefs, magandang gabi.
Magandang gabi.
Balitan natin dyan.
Adjournment na ng Congress. Naintindihan mo na ba kung ano yung meron sa Maharlika?
Nabasa ko yung discussion paper ng School of Econ. Fascinating.
Kinumpare mo ba dun sa hindi ba yung may draft na tayo? Draft kasi
pero I
it's
think,
in flux.
I'm still not an economist, but after reading it, ang isang takeaway ko is, this is still essentially, fundamentally, and at base, it was still the same concerns that we were talking about from the very start.
House, diba?
And from the very start, di ba? Parang in principle, kahit hindi natin naintindihan yung detalye, if you boil it down, it's the exact same questions that we had at the very start. Di ba?
Lalo na iba-iba sinasabi ng mga opisyal, hindi ba?
But that's the content na, we're still stuck pa nga dun sa process eh.
Yan.
Because natapos na sa Senado, you'd think na iaakit na nila yan after the BICAM sa palasyo. Pero may kailangan pang konting kalikalikot.
It's still evolving. Ngayon, pwede ba yun? Pwede ba yun?
Well, sabi nga naman ni Senator Villanueva, typographical errors lang.
But you can talk about typography. But sabi nga ni Stephen Konyeng naman dito, sabi niya, kung pag-uusapan lang, kung meron kita mo nga hindi kinapitalize ang monetary board.
Yan, typo yun. Baka pwedeng typo.
Yes, but it just speaks to the whole process,
yes.
Diba? Parang
Plus, a typo can mean a lot. A misplaced comma in a 7-figure amount will mean a big difference.
To that point, a monetary board may be different from the
monetary
board.
So, we get more insights on the Maharlika Investment Fund bill, the bill, right after this break. The Chiefs will be right back.
Joining our discussion tonight, our fellow chief on the show, former Senate President Franklin Drilon. Senator Drilon. Chief, gandang gabi po.
Good evening,
Gandang gabi, sir.
Senator.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here again.
Opo.
I part of the panel
Anyway, sir, so let's start again with the Maharlika Investment Fund bill. It's still a bill. Pero before we get into the content of it, marami nang nagsasalita dyan, and we certainly have a lot of questions. Referring to you first as former Senate President, people are also talking about the very process so far. Do you have any questions or concerns about the process so far?
Well, if we lower the tone of the debate, hindi wala akong nakikita masyadong problema. I don't see much of a problem with what transpired. Basically, the issue is it would appear that there are two conflicting provisions on prescription. One which says that the offense committed shall prescribe in 10 years. The other provision says it will prescribe in 20 years. What does this mean? One provision says after 10 years from the time the offense was committed, after 10 years you can no longer prosecute. The other provision says it is after 20 years that you can no longer prosecute. So there is a conflict between these two provisions. First, I want to emphasize that there is a remedy, and this has happened before when I was a minority leader. In 2019, there was an issue. The budget, or the House of Representatives in the 2020 budget included public works funds, which were not the subject of the agreement during the BICAM. In other words, if I recall correctly, in 2019, when the BICAM report got to the Senate, we saw that there were about 75 billion pesos in insertions from the House of Representatives after the third reading after the bill's third reading. In other words, under the law, after the third reading, you can no longer amend. What happened was after the third reading, the House of Representatives inserted about 75 billion in pork barrel funds. The Senate objected. Then Senate President Soto refused to sign the enrolled bill. So we were caught in a situation where, because of the Senate's objection to the insertion done by the House, which was unconstitutional and illegal, and the need to have a budget passed, we were caught in that quandary. What did we do? I advised the Senate President, we signed the enrolled copy, the enrolled bill, send it to Malacanang with a qualification that we are not endorsing the unconstitutional and illegal insertions coming from the House done after the third reading. So we did that in order that the Senate does not give up its position on the illegality of these amendments by the House, but second, achieve the need to have a budget. Applying that to the present situation, what can be done? The Senate President and the Speaker of the House can sign the enrolled bill, but include a notation that there is a inconsistency between the two sections insofar as prescription is concerned, and commit that if the bill is approved, then an amendatory bill will be filed and passed into law to correct that conflict. There is no hurry because this is a prescription rule, and it will not come into play until after 10 years. In other words, if an offense is committed, the period to prosecute should be at most 10 years. If it's filed on the 11th year, then there is a question as to whether or not the offense is prescribed. So you can see that the relevance of this provision comes only after 10 years.
Yes, sir.
Now, so that there is enough time for the House and the Senate to come up with a corrective legislation. There is time. There is time. You cannot just amend this bill without the Congress being convened in session because this has already was approved by both houses.
Sir,
So-
other than a mandatory bill, I mean, later on that can come in for which we have time, I'm just curious because you are going to make these notes anyway, as it's elevated to the president. Does the president have the power for line item vetoes here, and basically you just say, look, ito and napansin namin, and then he can handle it at that level?
No, the president does not have line item veto power. That only in this particular bill. That power only exists insofar as budget and tax measures are concerned. When the line item veto is specifically vested in the president by the Constitution.
So
It
you're
cannot
saying
be-
basically, sir, no tinkering with either measure. What you will have na lang is a repair bill. In other words, hindi pwedeng
That's
kalimutin
correct.
sa secretariat.
That's correct. I would not advise that that outside of the Senate and the House that a correction be made because it can raise a lot of questions. Remember that this bill is very controversial, and therefore everybody is watching what will happen. I will repeat: there is no harm. If the president approves the bill or approves the bill, then the corrective amendment to the prescriptive period, which are conflicting in two sections, can be done. You have 10 years to do it. So if they are able to pass the measure within the first year, there is no reason why they cannot pass a corrective bill, corrective legislation, just on this particular point for the next 10 years. It can be done.
Senator, balikan ko lang yung line item veto. It's 100% prohibition. Kasi ang iba sabi nila, if public funds are involved, pwede daw i-line item ni Presidente yung prohibition, yung 100% prohibition on the use of GSIS, SSS, and other GFI funds para mag-contribute sa Maharlika. Hindi niya pwedeng i-veto yung prohibition na yon. Tama ba yun?
No, he cannot veto that because the line item veto refers to an appropriations bill. And this is not an appropriations bill. This authorizes the investment in this fund by the sources specified in the bill. So, but it is not an allocation of a specific public funds. The Constitution allows a line item veto in appropriation measures, meaning the budget, or in tax measures, which involves raising of funds. So, by no stretch of in the argument can you consider this as an appropriation measure, which will allow a line item veto.
Pero Senator, diyan pa rin sa mga yung mga funds na yan. Yung prohibition na yan, is it open to interpretation? Kasi ang sinasabi, pinag-aawayan din yan ngayon Pwede pa rin daw mag-contribute ang SSS and GSIS and these GFIs if they think na attractive yung investment possibilities sa Maharlika. So ang sinasabi ng ibang senador, hindi na pwede yan, that complete prohibition under the law, under the bill. Anong tingin nyo?
My view is that the spirit of the bill is to prohibit investments from monies held in trust by government, GSIS, SSS funds, overseas workers' welfare funds, etc. In other words, the spirit of the prohibition is to prohibit the government from appropriating from funds which are held in trust. Huwag po natin kalimutan na yung pera ng SSS ay hindi po sa SSS yan, sa mga manggagawa yan. Yung ganun din sa GSIS. These are funds held in trust. So the spirit and the clear prohibition in several sections of the bill is to prohibit the government from from investing in the MIF through or using the funds of the government held in trust.
Pero sir,
Kaya hindi.
yes, sir. Pero sir,
Yes.
still on that prohibition, the National Treasurer and apparently also the Finance Secretary have found an apparent loophole. They're saying that this only prohibits them from, or GSIs and SSS, from directly investing equity into the Maharlika Fund, but it does not prevent them from investing in projects funded through the fund. Meron ba hong ganung flexibility?
What is prohibited is investment in whatever form, whether in equity, in loans, or capital outlay to be sourced from the trust funds. That intention is very clear in the various provisions of the law. So you cannot, there is no room for interpretation where the provisions are clear.
Yes, sir. Pero sir, down the line, I mean, for example, if the GSIs or the SSS say that we are not going to put money into Maharlika, but we will participate in a project funded through Maharlika.
Well, they can do that. Nothing will prevent them from doing that. But they run the risk of being charged for violation of the law, and there is imprisonment for that.
So it still is a violation of the law. I mean, it still does violate that provision.
Yes. If you ask me, yes, because the spirit of the law is to prohibit the use of trust funds or funds held by the government in trust for employees, for workers and employees. That is the spirit, prohibit the use of these funds. Now, you can do what you're going to do directly, you're going to do indirectly by investing in the project. So, which are by using SIS or SSS, etc. funds for a project, because what is prohibited is the use of these trust funds in an activity which directly or indirectly is connected with the MIF.
Okay. At least yung malinaw. Kasi, sir, kasi pinagtatalo nila yan ilang linggo na eh. And we were thinking kasi, mukhang may lusot. At least sa aming mga non-lawyers, parang lulusot dun ah.
You know, Ed, that is the problem. Kung gusto nilang magpalusot, yes, we cannot prevent them from doing that. They are the ones in power. But precisely the law has specifically provided for penalties. They can be liable for imprisonment if they make such investments.
But sir, I mean, asking you now as former Justice Secretary also, let's say that matter were to be forced or risk, diba? Let's say somebody is already running this and saying, no, we will take on this, we will push the envelope on this as a gray area. Diba? So we're not investing in the fund. We are the fund made this project. There was a call for investments. We're investing in that project. So it's a gray area right now. We go ahead and wade into that gray area. As Justice Secretary, how long does it take to even address that question in all reality? And by which time, diba, I can imagine a situation where an original investment has already been going and actually continuing for 10, 15 years before there's even a legal precedent to define the limits of the investments of these government of these contributions.
Well, obviously, nobody can predict how long it will take, and by that time, as you said, Roby, the investment has already been made. But that doesn't make the investment valid and legal. The liability is still there, even after X number of years. And that's what the issue that is being debated. In other words, if they make that investment, which is prohibited in my mind by if not in the clear wording, in the spirit of the law, then you have 10 years to prosecute whoever is responsible for that. And the other amendment is 20 years. So that is where precisely the conflict, or that precisely indicates that you cannot prevent these people from making investments and violating the clear mandate of the law. But may pananagutan po sila. Hindi po natin silang pwedeng pigilin na gumawa ng mga ganyang investment. Ngunit sila po ay may pananagutan at ang kulong ang haharapin nila kung mapatunayan na hindi po tama yung kanilang ginawa.
Sir, balayan ko lang yung we were talking kanina about the process involved in passing this bill. You pointed to the 2019 example with the House of Representatives inserting 75 billion additional dun sa kanilang version. But there kasi you're talking about two different versions from two different chambers. In this particular case, you're looking at basically one version with two conflicting provisions. What does that say to you about how this bill was passed? I mean, have you ever had any experience like this in the past where you had a bill na parang magkaiba ata itong
And
section?
let's call a spade a spade. Talagang pinagbadali ito because it involved a period na hinahabol na kung pwede sa SONA, sabihin ng Pangulo na ito'y nagawa na. So these are political considerations. Ang problema lang, in the process, nagmamadali, I mean, let's call a spade, nagkabuhol-buhol. Ngayon, yes, the bill was certified. And under the rules, if you certify the bill or the President certifies the bill as urgent, two requirements are dispensed with. Number one, the printing of the bill 3 days before voting. And number two, dispensing with the 3-day rule. Under the Constitution, between the second and third reading, there must be 3 days that must lapse. But when you certify the bill as urgent, you dispense with the 3 days and you do not have to have a printed copy of the measure. Ganun nangyari dito at hindi po ito unang pagkakataon na nangyari ito. So in the course of the debates, there is because of the urgency as certified by Malacanang, then no printed copy of the bill was distributed before third reading. So the Secretariat just had to rely on the record of the debate. There is no printed copy that can be examined by the members of the chamber. And so with that situation, hindi po napansin na dapat ang isang section ay burahin dahil in conflict sa amendment na pinayagan sa plenaryo. But as I said, this is a problem that is solvable. Number one, it can be transmitted to Malacanang so that the political consideration, no two ways about it, consideration that a bill was signed into law before the SONA is satisfied. Second, the conflicting provisions can be corrected because both chambers can agree that there was an error. So, and then number three, most important, is that the prescriptive period will only come into force 10 years from now, when the issue of whether or not a particular act can still be prosecuted or not. So, it can be done. The issue is not beyond solution.
Yes, sir.
Senator,
Yes, go ahead.
Senator, pag sinertify bang urgent, do you need to give the reason for the urgency? Parang hindi malinaw kasi sa mga tao eh. Bakit ba naging urgent to?
The Constitution, I cannot remember exactly what the standards are, but mayroong requirements sa ating saligang batas kung kailan pwedeng i-certify as urgent. But this provision has been interpreted liberally, you rely on the discretion of the President. Theoretically, and I underscore theoretically, a bill declaring a particular day as a holiday, theoretically, can be certified by the President as urgent. And as I said, practice is to give as much leeway to the president in certifying a particular measure as urgent. It may not meet the strict standards imposed by the Constitution, but the Constitution has been interpreted liberally, and the progressive bloc in the House, Bakabayan bloc, if I recall, brought the issue to the Supreme Court recently when the president certified as to the urgency of the Maharlika bill. They said it does not meet the constitutional requirements. Of course, the Supreme Court dismissed the petition, saying that it is premature. But this is a matter that should finally be interpreted by the Supreme Court.
Sir, still on the certification, a lot of people find it quite curious that the president certified two versions of the Maharlika bill for, of course, both Congresses that are completely different from each other, 5 or 6 months apart. How does that strike you? I mean, completely different yung sinetified dun sa House versus yung sinetified dun sa Senado. And also, what does that tell you about the urgency of it?
Well, and as I said, this wide discretion and latitude is given to the president in certifying a bill as urgent. The fact that there are two different versions would really not make the certification invalid. He is certifying both bills from the House and the Senate of different versions. The purpose being to dispense with the 3-day rule and have the bill passed on third reading. So, and then reconcile the differences in BICAM. So I will not raise an issue over the fact that there are two different versions that is being certified. But, you know, I am just an ordinary lawyer. Some other lawyers may see it differently, and they can bring this up for decision by the Supreme Court.
Okay, we're speaking with former Senate President Franklin Drilon. We will continue this discussion right after this break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
We're still talking about the Maharlika Investment Fund. Still with us, former Senate President Franklin Drilon. Senator, malinaw na ba sa inyo yung nature ng fund? Kasi we were talking with investment banker Stephen Kuunyeng, and he was reading the bill. Sabi niya, ang tingin daw niya, hindi na malaman kung sovereign wealth fund dyan o development fund, investment fund. Sabi niya, mukhang everything, everywhere, all at once, pwede kang kumuha ng investment and to put your money, yun na nga, everywhere. Ano sa tingin nyo? Yung pagkabasa niya, what's the nature of this fund?
You know, the issue would always have two sides. But I think, Ami, at bottom, I think the problem here is the lack of trust in government to be able to invest correctly these tons of money that could be coming their way. I repeat, the issue is trust. That is why, I noticed that the bill makes the GOCC Governance Act, which I crafted and passed in 2011 as among the applicable rules or laws, because issues like the fit and proper rule that will be required of those who will manage this fund should be strictly followed. Ito gawa ng tao, siyempre tao rin ang pwedeng gumawa ng katiwalian. And that is to me, that is the root of all these debates, the lack of trust. Fresh in the people's mind is the Farmally deal, wherein 42 billion just disappeared. And no matter what, all the safeguards that you have in COA, etc., some crooks in the PSDB dipped their dirty finger into the process and resulted in the loss of 42 billion. And of course, there is the Malaysian Development Fund, which again is pressing the minds of the people. So these circumstances created a lot of suspicion. And kahit po anong ilagay mo dyan, the safeguards, yung tao hindi po naniniwala na ito'y tama na ginawa. So it's really an issue of people watching and seeing what will happen and just avail of the safeguards under the law if they see something anomalous. You know, this is the political aspect of governance. The president and the Congress has put on the table this bill. Theoretically, if it turns out to be a bad investment, then they can be held responsible.
Yeah.
That is the nature of our system.
But Senator, dun sa mistrust na yan, right? And it's on many levels. On the one hand, we don't necessarily trust anybody necessarily to automatically make this grow, for it to necessarily perform. And then yung nga pong mas mahalagang nabanggit nyo, yung trust na malinis ang pamamalakad niyan, the governance issues, and so on. But even the most gracious critics would say, well, right now, we don't know. It could succeed, it could not, di ba? It could be a dud, it could be a failure, it could be a huge cost, but on the other hand, baka pwedeng maganda. Ang tanong ko lang po is, now we've created a fund. Andiyan na ba yan? Touch move na yan? Forever na yan? If the worst things comes to pass, hindi nag-perform, o nalugi tayo, or worse, nalugi na tayo, nanakawan pa tayo, how hard is it to undo not just the investments, but the fund itself? Can the country actually change its mind on this?
Well, okay, you know, in response, Sir Roby, today across the bureaucracy, there are agencies who are authorized to make investments of public funds. GSIS board can make investments. SSS board can make investments. OWA board can make investments. Of course, the most conservative is just to invest it in government securities where there is no risk involved. But the return is also very low because there is no risk. So they look for investments with a higher yield. And of course, the risks are there. The law only requires that it should be done with the exercise of the diligence of a good father of the family. You are a trustee of funds not your own. So when you make investments, you must do it in good faith and with due diligence. Now, as long as you meet the standards imposed by law on the investment, you incur no liability. Otherwise, wala na pong papasok sa pamalan, wala na pong magdidesisyon na mag-invest. Ilagay mo na lang sa government securities. Ang kikitain ni 3%, hindi po lalago ang pundo. But as long as the law imposes certain standards of conduct, the conduct must be that of must be diligence and what are the standards imposed of what we call the good father of a family. But that's how it works. There can be errors there can be errors which are not of your own making that causes the fund from not yielding as you had hoped for. And I'm sure as we talk, Robbie, if you look at the investments of GSIS and SSS, mapapansin niyo po may mga investments na hindi lumalago. But you cannot say it is wrong because the members of the board assert that they exercise due diligence.
Yes, sir, and allowing for all of that, no. But let me just rephrase the question. The law creates this fund. How different is this law relative to other laws that don't create funds. Like other laws that we say, oh, obsolete na yan, or now it's having unintended consequences. I-repeal na natin yan, tanggalin na natin yan, batas na yan. How different is that from this law that creates this fund? If down the line we now see the unintended consequences of it, never mind the performance, never mind the corruption, and never mind all of that, but just for whatever reason, we say, can we repeal that? Can we change our mind on this? But it's a fund that's already ongoing. There are people who have put their money in it. There are projects that are now being funded by it. Like I said, parang touch move na ba to? Because I can imagine now a future where constantly policymakers and legislators are just saying, ay, oo nga, parang hindi namin nakita yan. Pero huwag kayong mag-alala, we will just keep improving this forever.
Well, that's the risk we have to take as a body politic. We have elected representatives. We elected them, whether we're right or wrong. It's an exercise of police, of the power of the people to elect their leaders. Now, so mananagot po sila kung hindi tama yung ginawa, yung batas hindi tama. Kaya po, that is a risk that we have in a democracy, that a law can turn up to be a lemon, and we just have to accept that and have the corrective measures in order to do whatever is necessary.
Cambio naman tayo, ba?
Sige.
Sir, mamumuliti ka naman ako.
Or makikichismis man lang.
Makikichismis. Sir, kasi ganito, of course, I'm sure you know, yung medyo maraming kiskisan ngayon sa politika, and most of it is among the president's allies. There's a vice president, there's of course GMA, there's of course Martin Romualdez. But parang wala sa radar ang koalisyon ng Liberal Party and allies. So we're wondering, I know malayo pa yung presidential elections, pero as it's turning out, mukhang ang magiging opposition kung sakali will be somebody who is or some group that is right now part of the administration. Where is your coalition or your allies? Where are you in this whole equation? What's the likelihood of us having to choose between ally number 1 and ally number 2 ng administrasyon?
Nothing more in between.
And it is an accepted dictum in politics that 1 week is too long in politics. In other words, just to emphasize the point, it's too early. Marami po pong mangyayari, especially in our political system, where changing political parties is like changing your T-shirt every day. There is no real, honest-to-goodness political party system in our system. That is why you have turncoats, etc. So, in answer to your question, ang haba pa ng panahon. I can bet you, Ed, 1 year from now, when we again talk in your program, iba na ang sitwasyon. So, my answer to the question is, it's still too early to predict anything. Whatever we say, we cannot say it with certainty. The Liberal Party will stick to its principles, and the public has seen us. We will stick to what we believe is right. And if we'll just fit in one small Volkswagen, we will do so.
Pero kumusta yun? Senator, siyempre, nagtatanong din mga tao, what are the non-administration forces doing right now? Kasi, did you learn something from nag-iiba na campaign ngayon, di ba? And the unit team used those new methods of campaigning we saw the result last year. So, anong ginagawa niyo? Nagpo-postmortem man lang ba kayo kung ano nangyari in the past elections para what will we do better in 2025? And siyempre, preparations for the next presidential race starts as soon as the winners are known in the previous election, di ba? Kumustahin namin ano ang ginagawa ng opposition, the opposition that we know.
First, we are strengthening our social media structure. One of the reasons in my mind why we did not fare well in the last election was that we did not appreciate the strength and the influence of social media. Whereas the President Marcos, immediately after the 2016 election, when he lost the race for the vice presidency, immediately went and strengthened his social media presence and was able to influence the voice of the voters. Number two, we are organizing in the grassroots outside of the formal political system, because the reality is that in a mid-term election, every politician would try to go and get into the administration ticket for reasons I need not mention, but which you very well are aware of. So that is the reality we face. But we keep on organizing among the non-politicians, NGOs, groups which are not affiliated with any political party. It's a challenge, but we have no choice but to face that challenge.
Who would you say at this point is represents or even is the face of the opposition at this point? And I ask also because Lenny Robredo, I don't know if it's fair to call that an anointment, but basically he said that before. Risa Ontiveros is the leader of the opposition. I respect what you're saying, maaga pa. I expect that everybody we ask will be saying something along those lines. But at the same time, people, especially with politics in the Philippines, they want to associate a movement or a coalition with certain people, and certainly they want to see leadership. Who would you say is leading the opposition at this point?
Well, the highest elected official of the opposition is Senator Risa Ontiveros. So, as Eddie Roberto said, the responsibility falls on her shoulder to keep the opposition alive, which is essential in a democracy. And she has been going around, Senator Ontiveros has been going around organizing pocket groups or certain groups, not necessarily political, in order to shore up the following of the Liberal Party and the coalition of the opposition.
Pero sir, sabi nga ninyo, you're strengthening your social media presence. Pero sir, tapos na isang taon ng eleksyon eh. Parang hindi pa rin namin nakikita yung presence masyado ng partido ninyo. So, I know it's still early. As you said, it still is early. But like they say nga, the first day of the campaign begins on the first day of the administration.
Anyway, so let's see what happens. We should watch carefully. The only thing that we should keep in mind is a democracy needs an opposition.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, let me just tweak that question lang. Let me make it into a real question na lang. Okay, because I failed to. Sir, there are those who say, or there are those who speculate na in the end, the opposition that we know of right now would end up having to make alliances with the members of the administration who have broken off as a faction because of what's happening now. Of course, you can see you're looking at two influential factions in the administration na nagkikiskisan. What's the likelihood of that, of the Liberal Party and its allies, joining forces with the
Yes.
As a party, we have a certain set of programs. We are always open to alliances as long as whoever allies with us would adopt our platform. And because that's how we try to be true to our party system. Whether or not that will succeed is something that nobody can predict. And that is why I said 1 week is too long in politics. We do not know what will happen.
Sir, ang sa akin, what are some issues na sa tingin niyo, I mean, obviously we're all already excited for 2025. but as
Even
to,
2028,
but to be fair and to be objective, as we monitor the administration and the opposition, what do you see as the issues that will define the battle lines heading into 2025? And that will be fair for us to monitor and to judge the performance of the opposition.
Well, for one, the poverty in our country is always an issue. Marami pong mahihirap, and how successful the administration will be in reducing the poverty of our people is an issue. Number two, education. If you look at from a wider perspective, our educational system, we are in for a lot of trouble in the future when we suffer from education poverty, where where our children grade age 10 and below could not even read or write, and therefore, and this affects our future. So to me, this is an issue that the people should look at with interest. There are a lot, and then of course the health issue, where you know, we are by the standards of the UN, in terms of the United Nations, in terms of the number of hospital beds that that we can avail of, we are one of the poorest nations in the world. So these are major factors: unemployment, the economy, the matter of education, and health. These are, to me, the issues that will reverberate now and will reverberate in the future when the time election comes.
Pero Senator, sa tingin nyo, yung mga voters are still issues-oriented kasi parang na-institutionalize na yung nangangailangan kami ngayon, bigyan nyo kami ayuda, we'll vote for you. Malaking role ang that thing played a big role in the previous elections, no, lalo nagpandemya eh. 'Di ba? Pangakuan mo lang 'yan. Eto, bibigyan kita ngayon. Pag eto lumabas na resulta, bigyan ka pa rin namin. We'll take care of you. It's a welfare state eh, hindi ba? At kapag ganon, syempre mas malakas kung sino yung nakaupo. Paano magiging strategy kapag ganyan? Ang takbo ng these are a lot of our people, no? Marami naghihirap sa atin eh.
That is a challenge, and I don't think we have enough time to discuss everything this program. But indeed, this is a challenge, and we have been facing this kind of a problem for decades up to now, and I cannot attribute it to anything to a single factor. But what you're saying, Ami, is very true, and it's a challenge for us to be able to get out of this of this.
Sorry, one last question po, and we're almost out of time. You mentioned, of course, that poverty, and for that matter, food, agriculture matters. That the affordability of food is very high on the minds of people. It will likely be a very important thing to discuss, along with inflation and so on. The President has appointed two long-awaited appointments to two departments, Defense and Health. Pero glaring again to a lot of people, wala pa ring appointment sa agriculture. Were you surprised by that? And do you think that that is actually a point of conversation heading into this election and political season, whether or not President Marcos should continue to hold on to that agriculture portfolio?
I have taken the view along months ago that he should appoint a full-time Secretary of Agriculture. Remember that, if I'm not mistaken, a substantial percentage of our gross domestic product is contributed by the agriculture sector. But if you look at the productivity of that sector, it leaves much to be desired. Kulang talaga. And that is why that's the cause of poverty in our country, our lack of strength or lack of basic strength in agriculture. And that is where also all these charges of smuggling and all its ill effects would come because of our inadequate growth in agriculture. We have an inadequate production. We have to import in order to feed our people. And when you have to impose high tariffs in order to protect the local producers. And when you impose that, then smuggling becomes an attractive activity. So yes, there are a lot of myriad of problems on this, and I urge the president once more to already appoint a full-time agriculture secretary. Nothing to do with anything, but simply the focus of a full-time secretary of agriculture is completely different from the focus that the president can give to the agricultural sector because he has to attend to the affairs of the entire nation.
Okay, Senator. Sir, maraming salamat po. Always a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you.
Former Senate President Franklin Drilon. And that is all we have for the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
We hope what was discussed will keep the conversation going. I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.